The bright morning sun stretched across the private airfield as the roar of a luxury corporate jet echoed through the clear blue sky. Ground crews hurried into position while executives waited with polished black SUVs beside the runway. The aircraft touched down flawlessly, carrying one of the country's youngest aviation CEOs, Adriana Sterling, who had arrived to negotiate the purchase of the aging regional airport. As she stepped onto the tarmac surrounded by assistants and security, her eyes fell on a faded olive-green helicopter parked near an old maintenance hangar. Leaning against it was a quiet single father wearing oil-stained coveralls, carefully tightening a loose inspection panel while his little daughter handed him tools with a cheerful smile. Adriana glanced at the weathered helicopter, laughed softly, and remarked that relics like that belonged in museums, not at a modern airport. The nearby executives smiled politely, believing the man was nothing more than an aging mechanic struggling to keep obsolete machinery alive. None of them knew the quiet father owned every acre of land beneath their feet, including the very runway her jet had just landed on. Before this unforgettable story begins, if you believe kindness, humility, and second chances still matter, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes true character is worth more than appearances, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise. Your support helps us continue sharing emotional stories that remind us never to judge someone by what they wear or drive. The man beside the helicopter was Elias Carter, a widowed father who had spent the last 9 years raising his daughter, Hazel, after losing his wife to a sudden illness. Every morning before sunrise, he inspected aircraft, repaired engines, mowed grass along the taxiways, and greeted visiting pilots with the same warm smile. Most travelers assumed he worked as the airport's maintenance mechanic because they often saw him carrying toolboxes instead of briefcases. Few people realized he had inherited the airfield from his grandfather, a pioneering pilot who had transformed an abandoned pasture into one of the region's first community airports. Instead of replacing its humble character with luxury buildings, Elias chose to preserve the airfield as a place where young pilots, emergency medical crews, and small aviation businesses could still afford to fly. Adriana Sterling had built a remarkable reputation in the aviation industry. Through intelligence, determination, and relentless ambition, she had expanded her family's airline into an international transportation empire. Investors admired her bold decisions, but years of constant success had slowly convinced her that expensive technology and modern appearances always represented progress. Looking across the modest airfield that morning, she saw outdated hangars, aging aircraft, and weathered equipment. She believed purchasing the property would allow her company to replace everything with a state-of-the-art executive aviation center designed exclusively for wealthy clients. As surveyors began measuring the land, Elias quietly continued servicing the old helicopter. Hazel sat nearby sketching airplanes in a small notebook while happily watching birds circle above the runway. Every few minutes she looked proudly toward her father, believing there was no better pilot or mechanic anywhere in the world. Seeing the close bond between them briefly reminded several airport employees of why they loved working there. Elias treated every customer, student pilot, and mechanic like family, never caring whether someone arrived in a luxury jet or a tiny training aircraft. The helicopter itself carried a remarkable history. Decades earlier, Elias's grandfather had flown that very aircraft during countless emergency rescue missions after floods, wildfires, and mountain accidents. Though its faded paint revealed years of service, every critical component had been meticulously restored by Elias himself. Aviation enthusiasts from across the country often visited simply to admire the helicopter's extraordinary history, but Adriana never bothered asking why such an old machine occupied a place of honor beside the main hangar. To her, it appeared to be little more than an outdated curiosity taking up valuable space. Later that morning, lawyers gathered inside the airport administration office to discuss ownership documents before negotiations officially began. Adriana confidently reviewed investment plans worth hundreds of millions of dollars, convinced the purchase would be completed before sunset. Just as the meeting was about to begin, the county registrar entered carrying a large collection of original property records. After carefully verifying the legal ownership, he smiled respectfully toward Elias, who had quietly walked into the room after washing the grease from his hands. Looking directly at the executives, the registrar calmly announced that every runway, hangar, fuel depot, and acre of surrounding land belonged to Elias Carter, whose family had owned the airport continuously for more than 70 years. The room fell completely silent. Adriana slowly turned toward the quiet single father she had mocked only hours earlier. For the first time that day, she no longer saw a mechanic standing beside an old helicopter. She saw the humble owner of the very airfield where her billion-dollar company hoped to build its future, and she suddenly realized she knew absolutely nothing about the extraordinary man she had judged at first glance. The warm afternoon sun bathed the airfield in golden light, but inside the administration building the atmosphere had become painfully quiet. Every executive stared at the property records spread across the conference table. The signatures, deeds, and county seals confirmed beyond any doubt that Elias Carter was the sole owner of the entire airfield. Adriana Sterling slowly lowered the expensive proposal she had prepared, realizing that the quiet single father she had dismissed beside the old helicopter held the future of her company's expansion in his hands. The confidence that had filled the room only minutes earlier was replaced by stunned silence. Elias showed no sign of pride or revenge. He simply thanked the county registrar, took his seat, and listened respectfully as Adriana explained her vision for transforming the airfield into an exclusive executive aviation center. The presentation was impressive, promising luxury terminals, private lounges, and enormous profits. Yet while everyone admired the financial projections, Elias quietly studied a map showing that the new construction would eliminate the small flight school, the emergency medical helicopter base, and several community hangars that had served local pilots for decades. When the presentation ended, Elias calmly shared the story of the airfield's beginnings. His grandfather had built it after returning home from military service with one simple dream, that no family living in the surrounding mountains would ever be isolated during emergencies again. Over the years, rescue helicopters, medical evacuation teams, volunteer firefighters, and young aviation students had all relied on the modest airport. The land had never been viewed merely as a business. It had always been a place where lives were protected and dreams of flight were born. As the conversation continued, an urgent radio transmission suddenly interrupted the meeting. A violent thunderstorm had formed unexpectedly over the nearby mountains. A small sightseeing aircraft carrying a family had suffered engine trouble and was desperately searching for a safe place to land. Strong crosswinds and low visibility made every nearby airport unsafe except for one narrow emergency runway on Elias's property that larger development plans intended to remove. Without hesitation, Elias grabbed his headset and ran toward the old helicopter. Ground crews immediately followed his instructions with complete confidence. Within seconds the once quiet airfield transformed into a perfectly coordinated rescue operation. Adriana watched in amazement as every employee responded to Elias with absolute trust. There was no panic, no confusion, only calm leadership built on years of experience. The aging helicopter lifted smoothly into the afternoon sky. Despite its weathered appearance, it flew with remarkable precision. Guided by Elias, rescue teams located the struggling aircraft, escorted it safely through the storm, and directed it toward the emergency runway. Moments later the damaged plane touched down safely. Parents embraced their frightened children as paramedics confirmed that everyone had survived without serious injuries. Watching the emotional reunion, Adriana felt tears forming in her eyes. For the first time, she understood why Elias had refused to replace history with luxury. That old helicopter she had laughed at was not a relic. It was a symbol of decades spent saving lives. The modest airfield she had planned to redesign was far more than valuable real estate. It was a lifeline for an entire region. As evening approached, Adriana quietly walked toward Elias while Hazel proudly hugged her father after another successful rescue. Looking at the little girl smiling beside him, Adriana realized that true wealth could never be measured by private jets or billion-dollar projects. It was measured by the number of lives one chose to protect. If this story is touching your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness is true strength, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more inspiring stories about humility, family, and second chances. Special request. Please comment. Real greatness serves others before itself. Standing beside the old helicopter as the evening sun painted the sky with shades of gold, Adriana knew that the most important decision of her career was no longer about buying an airport. It was about earning the respect of the humble single father she had so badly misjudged. The next morning, the rising sun cast a warm golden glow across the airfield as pilots, mechanics, local families, and reporters gathered near the main hangar. News of the dramatic rescue had spread across the country overnight. Headlines praised the courage of the unknown single father who had saved an entire family with an old helicopter that many had dismissed as obsolete. Cameras were no longer focused on Adriana Sterling's luxury jet. Instead, they followed Elias Carter, who who quietly walked across the runway holding his daughter Hazel's hand, smiling as if he had done nothing extraordinary. Standing before the crowd, Adriana took a deep breath and admitted something few powerful executives ever have the courage to confess. She publicly apologized for judging Elias by his worn clothes, his weathered helicopter, and the grease on his hands. She explained that she had mistaken simplicity for weakness and forgotten that true greatness often hides behind humility. Looking toward Elias with sincere respect, she said the greatest lesson of her career had not come from a business school or a boardroom, but from a father who valued people more than profit. Instead of purchasing the airfield, Adriana announced a completely different partnership. Her company would invest millions to restore the runways, modernize safety equipment, and expand emergency aviation services, while preserving the community flight school, the rescue helicopter base, and every historic building that had served generations of local pilots. Every improvement would be made under Elias's leadership, ensuring that the airport never lost the purpose his grandfather had envisioned so many years earlier. Elias accepted the partnership with quiet gratitude. He explained that airports were never built simply for airplanes. They existed to bring people home, deliver hope during disasters, and create opportunities for young dreamers who looked toward the sky believing anything was possible. Money could improve buildings, he said, but only compassion could preserve their purpose. His words touched everyone present, including seasoned pilots who had spent decades flying around the world. Months later, the airfield became one of the country's most respected regional aviation centers. Young students trained there through scholarships funded by Adriana's company. Emergency rescue teams received modern helicopters while the old olive green aircraft remained carefully restored inside a museum hangar, reminding every visitor that history should never be forgotten. Beside it stood a bronze plaque engraved with simple words. This helicopter carried hope long before it carried headlines. Dedicated to Elias Carter, whose humility proved that the greatest leaders serve before they are seen. Hazel continued growing up surrounded by airplanes, laughter, and people who treated her father with the respect he had always deserved. Every afternoon after school, she still ran across the runway to greet him with the same joyful smile. Watching them together reminded everyone that the strongest legacy a parent can leave is not wealth, but character. Adriana often returned to the airfield, not as a buyer or a CEO seeking another business deal, but as a trusted friend. She discovered that her greatest investment had never been the land beneath the runway. It had been learning that leadership begins with listening, respect, and the willingness to admit when you are wrong. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness changes lives, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories about family, humility, and second chances. Special request. Please comment, never judge a person's worth by what you first see. As the evening sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, Elias watched another rescue helicopter lift gracefully into the sky from the runway his grandfather had built with nothing more than faith and determination. Standing beside his daughter, he realized that the greatest inheritance he could ever leave her was not an airfield, a helicopter, or a piece of land. It was the quiet example that true strength wears humility, true success serves others, and the richest people in the world are those whose hearts remain grounded, no matter how high they fly.